Hello YouTubers. Today I'm going to talk to you about a very interesting technology, one of the most popular open source technology in the storage world. Today I'm going to talk to you about Postgres. It's an open source technology that is being used by some of the most popular software houses, software companies around the world. And in addition to that, I'm going to show you how you can integrate your existing ASP.NET Core application with Postgres and how you can actually add even OData on top of it to make even more power, to put in even more power into your APIs and make the best out of your data for your customers and your API consumers. But for starters, let's talk a little bit about Postgres. It's an open source technology. It's if you go on Stack Overflow for StackShare, you'll find they have a pretty good portfolio here. There are 14,000 followers, 19,000 stacks, 3,000 votes for the technology. Powerful open source object relational database system. It's being used by some of the most popular software companies and apps around the world, like GitLab is using it, MIT, Robinhood. It's the stock exchange mobile app, one of my favorite. It's used by DuckDuckGo, an open source privacy aware search engine, one of my favorites as well. It's used by Uber, Netflix, Spotify, Instagram, Reddit, Instacart, StackShare, Twitch, and it's also used by companies like Product Hunt. So many different technologies out there that are really invested in using Postgres. There's over 14,000 developers around the world today on StackShare that say they have used Postgres. So that's a very interesting statistic here. More importantly, if you look at, because they are open source, if you go to their GitHub page, they have over 6,000 stars. They are forked 2,000 times. It's a pretty good database. It's a pretty good technology. I haven't personally given it the perf test yet, but it's definitely worth exploring. But now let's jump into figuring out how we can make an existing ASP.NET Core application interact with Postgres. Postgres is just like SQL. Azure very recently started to offer Postgres in their stack. So if you go to Microsoft Azure, if you go to the portal and type in Postgres, and you want to type Postgres with P uppercase, if you type Postgres with P lowercase, it'll just point to the Docker version of Postgres. It's not going to give you all the options. So when you search for it, you want to make sure you're searching by Postgres with P uppercase like that. And if you do with P uppercase, you're going to find a whole bunch of companies that offer Postgres. The one that we really are interested in, there's, you see the technology and then the developer and some description. That's just how the products are shown. Postgres Professional, is offering so many different flavors of Postgres. But the one we're going to go with today is Postgres Database, Azure Database for Postgres SQL, right? We're going to use Postgres SQL with that is published officially by Microsoft. So let's go ahead and just create a Postgres. Now, because it's very high volume, hyperscale database, you could either choose to go with the Citus option, hyperscale Citus server group, best for ultra high performance. If you want to really go to town with your data, that's definitely the option. But for the purpose of this demo, we're just going to go with a single server, since we're not really creating a high volume application or anything. So we need a name for our service. Let's call it students DB server, right? Usually if you're provisioning resources for different environment, I would go and do a dash and say dash dev, right? But this is just a demo. I'm just leaving it as is. Admin username, so I'm just going to use my username, and then I'm going to put my password. Let's put some random password, ABCD1234 exclamation mark. Is that happy? Great. ABCD1234. And they don't match. ABCD1234, and here's, okay, so there's our guy, and then there's a bunch of versions in here. I'm not sure why it's selecting a 10 instead of the latest and greatest as an option, so I'm just going to leave it as is. I don't think it makes any difference for our demo today, but if you're really interested, go ahead, look up, see what changes they have between Postgres 10 and 11. In the server configuration, what comes out of the box is a configuration that'll cost you around $272 a month, but you could actually lower that a little bit. I could go, I don't want 2 cores. I could go with 1 core. I could go with storage of 5 gigabits. What else can I lower in here? What is that? Gen 5, locally redundant, recover, blah, blah. Okay, that's great. So I guess that's, can I lower this? No, it's not going to do anything. So that's the lowest you could get the database for, $25.80 approximately. This is estimated, approximately $25.80 a month for 1 core, 1 vCore, and 5 gigs of storage. And your backup retention is 7 days. You can't go even lower than that. There you will have a backup retention, whether you like it or not. People are gonna make you have a backup retention. So that's what this is. So I'm just gonna put that in here. I think everything now is in line. Tags, if you care about tags for your security and reporting. We don't have any security and reporting for this particular resource, so we don't have to care about it. Here's a summary of all the stuff that needs to happen, that are going to execute. There's your database, here's your admin, here's the compute and storage. Let's just go ahead and create the database. And while we're creating the database, let's prep up our ASP.NET Core application. So let's minimize this window for a little bit. Let's go ahead in here and say create a new project. And this is ASP.NET application. There you go. Next. And then what do we call it? We call it students.api. Students API system. So here we go. Let's create students.api. We are going to use ASP.NET Core 3.1 with Students API. So this is great. Click create. All good and dandy. And then I'm not really a big fan of the current template of ASP.NET Core. It comes in with a weather forecast controller. I don't really care much for it. I think it's there just to make sure you have a good sample of data that's coming back from your system. And if you're starting a new project from scratch, when you push that without any particular business logic in it, it tells you that things are running end to end. You can actually interact and communicate with your controller. Some of the best engineers I've ever worked with, they like to leave a funny message like, hello Mario, the princess is living in another castle, and stuff like that. So anyway, these are just simple details. So with that being said, let's get rid of that controller. We don't need that guy. And let's get rid of the weather forecast. And while we're at it, let's build a couple of, let's build a model in here. So this is models, and let's build a broker. So let's go and build a brokers. Here are brokers. For those who are not familiar what brokers are, it's basically what you call a repository or a client. Broker is something more inclusive for anything that has that communicates with an external resource or an external dependency. So let's just go ahead and create a student model in here. So that's student.cs. And let's go ahead and say GUID ID. So there's a student ID. And I want a name. So here's a student name. And let's put a score. So here's a score. So here's my model. Student ID, name, score. There's no magic there. Let's go, sorry, this student should go in the models area. So let me move that into the models and make sure I change the database. It would be nice if it just changed the database for us, but it doesn't do that. And while we're at it, we have usings in here that we don't need. So if you do control period, that'll just remove all these usings up there. You could actually do it across your entire solution. If you right click on the project, go analyze, code, cleanup, and then click run code cleanup profile 1. It'll just clean all your code and all the files. If you're doing this in a source controlled project, you want to be careful because it's going to change a lot of files, and then it's going to be a pain in the rear for code reviewers to actually know what you were actually changing. So I highly recommend that you do that periodically. Make sure that if there's a big change for it, just make it in its own pull request so you don't annoy the code reviewers. You just want them to, approve your code real quick. So let's build a broker in here. So let's call it storage broker. Storage, because it's the most generic term we could use to describe a storage. It could be NoSQL, SQL, it could be anything. It could be literally a file on your system, which has proven to be really fast. It doesn't matter. It's just a storage broker. It's not really, it's very technology agnostic. It doesn't know whether it's talking to Postgres or SQL, whatever that is. Let's go ahead and install an important NuGet package in here, which is the Postgres package. Let's go in here, Postgres. Here's our guy. You're going to find an interesting package in here, which is what we need. NPG SQL, Entity Framework Core, Postgres SQL. So this is the package you want to pick up. And then I'm going to push the code to source control so you guys could just run it yourselves. And then there is also in here NPG. So the version here is 3.1. I'm just going to go ahead and install that version real quick. Excuse me. All right. And if you're familiar with the entity framework, absolutely nothing changes on how you set this up. You have a DB context. You go and say CTOR, that's a constructor. You pass in here DB context options. And you pass in a storage broker as your type, storage broker. And then you call that options. And then to the parent class, the base class, you want to pass in options. And if you really are pushing things to production, you want to enable auto migration, you could just go in here and say this.database.migrate. So you won't have to do database update every time you create a migration. Every time your system will run, it'll just install that stuff for you. And that's really what you want. Unless in very particular cases, you want to stop it for a second until you fix a migration issue. So with that being said, so we have the migration. Now we need to put in the DB set, which is where our students are going to be. So this is DB set student. Let's do control period, pull in the model, and then call this guy student. This is what your database table is going to look like, right? It's going to be called students, right? It's going to be called students. So, okay, so we created the DB set. We created all that good stuff. Now let's go ahead. The next step here we want to do, we want to set up the configurations for our database connection. Ideally, I want you to go to settings, right? And you want to go in here and say something like connection strengths, right? And then you put that in here and you say default connection, something like that. All right. Now the question is, where are you going to get that connection from? You need that connection. So if you go back to the to Azure database, the Azure dashboard, you're going to see in here that we already provisioned our Postgres SQL instance. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll find already built in 3 different databases. The one we want to target is Postgres, right? If you go to the connection strings area on the left in here, you have all kinds of different connection strings that you may need for your application. The one that we're going to pick up is this one, server, the ADO.NET for Postgres. So let's go in here. Here's my students. And then I'm going to post that connection string in here. So there's a couple of things in here you want to pay attention to. Your database, you already have an existing database. We call it Postgres. It comes in out of the box, but you can provision your own as well if you want to. And you want to also update your password. So if you remember, we set up the password ABCD1234 exclamation. So that's our password. There's a couple of things here just so people don't take in bad practices. In a production environment, when you're adding your secrets, number one thing, if you really have to add a secret, then use something like Key Vault. Use something like Key Vault where you could actually put your secrets in Key Vault and only allow particular users, if they're trying to pull in that information, Key Vault will detect their managed identity or AD in Azure and allow them to pull in these secrets, right? That's number one. If you want to even do it better, you want to actually allow people to just spin up local instances. We call it the airplane mode. So if they are in an airplane and they don't have a Wi-Fi, their entire application should still function locally, right? So in your configurations, you allow them to spin up an instance locally and communicate with it. Or you could allow them, you could allow the instance that is in the cloud to have a managed identity to access your Postgres instance. So that's the best practice here. But again, for the purpose of this demo, I'm just showing you bare bones what happens if you're trying something out. Postgres is super secure, and so is Azure. If you go to your instance in here, you will notice that you could actually allow very particular services to access your application. You could allow access to Azure services, and then you're allowing a particular service through access control to actually access your information. That's an option. But more importantly, I wouldn't be able to access Azure, access this instance, if my IP as a client wasn't set up on this instance to be able to access it, right? So you want to go in the connection security before you run anything, and you want to add client IP. So it would add your IP address, and then you want to save that. Some people might say, oh, you're crazy, you're putting your IP on the internet. It's okay, it's a dynamic IP. As soon as I reset my router, I get a new IP, and my IP gets assigned to someone else somewhere in Hawaii maybe. So all right, so we set up that IP situation. Let's go down to our database here and let's do some setup, right? The setup here is very, very similar to a normal SQL setup. All I want to do here is just go in here and say services.add DB context. Here's my storage broker. And then with your storage broker, you want to go and say, this is my context object, context, and then dot use np, what is it? Use npg SQL. Use npg SQL, something like that. If you do control period, it'll pull in the dependencies that you need, and then in here you want to pass in the connection string. Connection string, let's pull in the connection string. So string connection string equal, configuration dot get connection string. Get connection string, and then pass in here default connection. Also with the configurations, I really like mapping to strongly typed objects. Meaning that you build in a model that represents your objects and you map to it, right? So anyway, you have the connection string in here, pass that in here, connection string. So this is good, and I normally just encapsulate all of that in its own method in the configuration. Like I could just say initialize storage. Right? It makes your configuration service method much easier to read and much easier to understand. And then you send in your private methods all the way down where only those who seek that kind of knowledge could find them. Right? So that's that. So we abstracted that away, initialize storage services, and this is the details. Now we want to create a controller, an API controller. We're going to generate an API controller. And this API controller is going to use our storage broker to generate CRUD operation endpoints for us. So I'm just going to click add in here. If my configuration are right, it's just going to work straight forward with the IP. So I allowed my client. I put in the connection string. Let's just hope things work out. There you go. Building project. Is it going to work? Generating code. There you go. So you have your API endpoint controller going on here. So we have enabled automatic migration. Do not forget to create a migration file. So we want to go here and say add migration. Why did I say schools? That was from a previous demo. We could also, this is a great opportunity to just show you how you can remove a migration. So if you go and say remove migration, it'll just completely remove that migration for you. Has already been applied to the database, reverted and try again. Okay, So that they already have applied this because we have the auto migration going on. So you want to disable this guy for a second. That's a great opportunity to even talk about, you know, disabling that. And let's try to remove that migration again. Remove migration. It's already been applied. Revert it and try again. Right. Schools has already been applied to the database. If the migration has been applied in another database, consider reverting it. Okay. So how about revert migration? So we disabled our migration in here. I mean, I guess it's okay. It already generated for the students, but we just want to change the name here is kind of bothersome. So I guess it's fine. We'll just go on with that. I am kind of surprised it didn't let me remove the migration though, because let's see that real quick. Revert it and try again. So let's see if we can revert the migration. We could unapply all these migrations real quick by saying update database. This is just a suggestion real quick for some of the people. To unapply the migration, and then we could do dash migration 0. Does that work? I don't know. Let's find out. So I'm trying to unapply all the migrations. So that's unapplied migrations, and now let's just remove that migration. It should just completely remove the file for us. There you go. That's exactly what I wanted. So this is great. Now let's just actually create a migration. Let's back enable our database migration. Since this is a one-liner, we could just say fat arrow like that. And then let's go down to package manager console and say add migration students. So this will create a new migration for me with the students. Yeah, I took a space, that's why. Okay, let's do that again. Add migration students. This one should work. There you go. So now we generated good migration. We unapplied all the migrations in the database, and then we're again enabling all that stuff. Now we're applying the students migration. Now we have that in place. The only thing that's left for us is to run our application and actually test and see. Let's see if to test and see if we are actually connecting to the database. Before I do that, let's change this guy to API/students. And let's change this one to actually API/students, like that. Right, and now let's see why this guy was complaining. Unable to connect to web server IIS Express. Let's kill the existing one. I have an IIS Express running down here. Let's try to run that again. If I say students API and run that guy, let's see if that guy will work with us. So I'll just run the hosted version, and I'll try to hit localhost 5000. So there you go. So now if I'm calling that, it's basically trying to contact Postgres and pull in a list of students. Let's do all that stuff on Postman, because it's a lot easier. The only thing with Postman is that I wonder if I could just increase the text size for people here so they could see on their phones. Certificates proxy. I don't see that option in here, so you're gonna have to watch that on a a normal PC, I guess. So, which I really highly encourage. I encourage people to watch these videos on their PCs because it makes it a lot easier to see what I'm trying to do. So let's do a git here real quick. So now I'm doing a git. I'm getting a list. If I do a post and I post in a school, a student. So let's say the student name is Hassan, and the student score, let's say, is 100. Let's post that guy. So here's another. So here's a student. Let's post some of them. Let's say Cody Allen. If Cody is 200. Let's post in Vishu Goli. Let's give Vishu 250. So I have 3 students in here, right? Now, let's see if I can retrieve these students. So if I say get, it should give me a list of 3 students in here. There you go. So I have 3 students. They have their scores. Everything is good and dandy. Let's go ahead and try to, let's update a student. So let's pick up Vishu in here and let's try to update his record. So let's go in here and say student/student ID. Here is put. Here's ID. You want to mention the ID in here when you're posting. Excuse me. And then let's change the name from Vishu to Vishwa, for instance. And then let's click post, put. So there you go. It says 200, 204, no content. Ideally, I like to return the thing that has been updated, but that's just what the template is doing. Some standards confirm, some standards deny. So if I do get again, it'll give me Vishwa with his name updated. If I do get with a particular ID, it'll give me Vishwa with his name updated, just the one particular student. So far so good. You're working with Postgres, you're communicating with the database, you are using ASP.NET Core to expose that kind of functionality. Now let's make our API even more interesting. Let's go ahead and add in OData on top of this application. So I'm gonna go in here and say OData. I'm looking for ASPNET. Hold on, ASPNET Core OData. The version we're looking for is version 7.3. So this is ASP.NET Core, Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.OData. This is the main guy that we want to care about. We're going to install that to our ASP.NET Core 3.1 application. API real quick, accept, give that guy the world. So fantastic. So this guy's deployed. And now let's fix our startup a little bit to work with that. So the first thing I want to do here, I want to disable, this is MVC options. I want to disable endpoint routing because the current version doesn't really support that. So endpoint routing is false. So disable that. And then let's go and say services.add OData. So we're going to add OData to our application, right? And then we want to build another private method that returns an IDM model, an EDM model. And then we can say get EDM model, right? And then here is my EDM model builder, new OData model convention builder, something like that. I never remember that one. It's a long one. Is it convention? Let me check real quick. Model builder convention or something like that. Some things just don't stick, you know. OData convention model builder. OData convention. So I just switched them. OData convention model builder. There you go. This is one of those configurations that you set up once and you forget about it. So I don't expect people to actually remember that out of the box. But here's our model builder, and then set entity set, and then you want to pass in the student in here, and then you want to reference your entity set, which is students, and then you just want to return EDM model builder dot get EDM model. So I'm returning my EDM model right here. This should be EDM model. It doesn't really matter. It's the same thing for the implementation, but it's all good. So because also again you can't use endpoint routing, so I'm removing endpoint routing and I'm going here and saying app.useMVC and there is my route builder. And then with my route builder, I'm going here and adding in all my OData magic. So select expand. I don't think we're really going to need expand, but we're definitely going to need filter. Maybe count. We'll play with count a little bit. And then route builder, we want to set up map OData service route. So that's OData, and then get EDM. So that's the route name and the route prefix. We can actually change it. We cannot change it to anything else. So that's the route that we have. So let's get EDM model. So now we have that. The last thing I want to set up is my student controller, right? So in here, I want to say enable query. So enable query. So this is good. And I probably don't need that necessarily because I changed my route, right? So that should be, OData should figure that out for you out of the box. So now that we added OData, let's just give our project some grooming, just clean up all the unused, unneeded usings. So I have my app settings, you have your stuff, everything is good and dandy. Let's run our application and let's hit that endpoint. Let's hit that endpoint real quick. So here is Postman. And then instead of students now, it's going to be /OData. Actually, I'm going to show you that on the browser. It's much better and easier to use since we're just doing get operation. That's really all what a browser does. So here is OData and then /students. So this guy should basically give me all the students that I added, Cody and Vishwa and myself. And it has the DB context in it. And all that data is coming from Postgres. All that data is coming directly from Postgres. Now let's play with that data a little bit. Let's say select. I only want the name of the students. I'll just go and give me back student's name. I want to play with it a little bit and say filter score is greater than 100. Where score is greater than 100. Let's see if that guy there. So that gives you the people who have score greater than 100. So if I say filter the score, so give me give me the name and the score. It should go into that, right? So OData, Entity Framework, Postgres, Azure with ASP.NET Core. That's really pretty much all that it is. Like I said, I'm going to give you that source code so you could play with it, although that it's not really different from anything else. Like this is pretty much the exact same. Like if you switch with this code, if you switch your technology from the configuration if you just switch this one line really, if you go to database initialize storage, and if you go in here and switch from use NPG SQL to use SQL, it'll just function, after it applies the migrations, which it does automatically, right? So that's pretty much it. That's it about Postgres. What do you think about Postgres? Do you think you could, use it in your next application with Azure? If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out. I appreciate the subscribers, people who are watching my videos, and very happy to hear your feedback. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in another video.